It's another beautiful Sunday afternoon. This is Rubbin Minds. Welcome. My name is Ebuka Obuchendu. Thanks a lot for joining us. We have had a very eventful week across the nation. So many issues to tackle, but we're going to be talking today at the top of the show about exploring the ease of doing business in Nigeria, especially with a lot of the matters arising in the last week. If you've been following the news, you've heard a lot of what's happened with the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Road. It's been the most talked about infrastructure project in many, many months, probably years in our history, and it's come with its own fair share of controversy. And we're going to be trying to understand what that means for the future of Nigeria on so many aspects, but most importantly, with regards to investment and the ease of doing business. I'm joined here by the CEO of Finance with Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed. Thanks a lot for joining us. So, I was trying to get through to look at Nigeria's ranking in the ease of doing business, and we're somewhere around the 131st position out of 190. A lot of presidents come in and, give these assurances that that's going to be the goal, to get us up in that ranking by creating policies that would help that. We've seen sort of attempts to, relax what happens at CAC with registration of companies, but it goes beyond that. The mood of the government, the language of the government, and how you act with those who are already here says a lot, about how those who are not here yet will come in. What are your thoughts so far? It's been about a year now since the present administration has been in office. What sense do you get from the President Tinubu administration?
I think about the area of ease of doing business, I don't think he has touched on that yet. I don't think so, because they came in the middle a lot of barrage of problems, especially exchange rate, economics, so because virtually there was no economy. I think the only government official during the Buhari administration that looked at the area of the ease of doing business was the former Vice President Yemi Osinbajo. Remember when he was acting president, he went to the airport. He said no more having, because when you go to the airport, you have NDLE, you have custom, you have police, you have paramilitary, and he went there and said, no, you can't be doing this. I'll move from custom to NDLE, from NDLE to this with my bags. So he tried to come up with a policy. I think that worked. That's why we moved from we're about 160 to where we are up to now. I think since this administration have come into power, they've not been able to stamp their feet on that, on the ease of doing business, because I think it's only the Minister of Interior that has been trying to make sure that we begin to have this synergy in the airport, whereby he said they will soon have the digital clearance of your immigration passport, and that. You need to go back and remember the CNN reporter that said anytime he comes into this country, he will still have to pay for biometrics. So those are part of the things that the government really need to look at. Knowing especially that within Africa, we need to begin to set a pace within ourselves, because in Europe, I don't need, I just need my passport to go to any place in Europe if I'm a citizen of the European nation. How can you be a citizen of the EU and you want to go to a little place as Seychelles, and they are telling you that you have to pay for your visa and that and that? I don't think so. That for me, that's a major challenge, because Africans have not looked at it as a means of growing their economy, the ease of doing business, because it has created a lot of room for corruption, a lot of room for personal enrichment. So a lot needs to be done there, but kudos to the Ministry of Interior with what they're doing, especially in the airport, trying to make sure that we have that ease of coming in and going out, but there's still a lot to be done. And also you can give it to the immigration officers, also in the Murtala Mohammed airport. They've been very cordial in the way they relate with people, but some have been bad eggs, because we saw some videos. But again, when you look at it by and large, where we are coming from, we should say we are a little bit there from 160, 130, but we've been too static in 130, so we need to move up.
People will say there's a lot of low-hanging fruits for a lot of these things that are the issues. You've mentioned a couple of them. At the airport now, you still have a couple of those officials who stop you at every point when you're coming in, and people have always wondered why that synergy does not happen. But that's just even one. I think the Minister of Aviation did have an interview during the week talking about trying to get a private partner who was going to sort of start running the airport, since government creates all of these bottlenecks. But the government, on the other hand, also says infrastructure is the biggest way to attract FDI. They tell you you have to build these things for them to see that it's easy to come in. You know, the infrastructure is there, so it's easier. Is that a valid point? Because that's one of the biggest selling points the Minister of Works has put forward with this particular project.
You see, President Buhari prided himself to be the infrastructural president. And after I left, we've seen a lot of, nothing seems to have moved our economy for 8 years under Kumoso. We've seen how much we borrowed and borrowed and borrowed to build infrastructures that now are not even generating the necessary revenue. When it comes to infrastructure, you see, the problem I think with Nigeria is that when we think of infrastructure, we just think of that large, gigantic road network, that big building, that state-of-the-art building. Nobody looked at the human infrastructure. Because sometimes you build the infrastructure, who is going to manage the infrastructure? So the challenge we've had is not because we cannot build infrastructure. Who is going to manage this infrastructure? So after some time, when you don't have managers of this infrastructure, they were trained to manage this infrastructure, or they have the capability to, this infrastructure decay. All you need to look at, you look at the National Stadium in Lagos, you look at the Mashood Abiola Stadium in Abuja also, you see where capacity has not come to play. Now, if you go to develop war, when the Minister of Aviation is saying, you know what, we need to handle it, it's not rocket science for me. So what are your ministry staff doing? Why didn't you use that as an avenue to create more jobs? Why do you mean as an avenue also to boost their capability? When you go to foreign countries, like you said, I pick up my luggage. Nobody check my luggage again after it's dropped. It's always a digital. So how much are we trying to develop this kind of platform? But here you are traveling, you are coming, you are holding your tag, and you come in from the plane, and you come with 2-3 bags. They are counting the bag and looking at the tags. Those are infrastructures. So even if you bring in the private people, and mark you, most of the people that are even looking at those your tax are even private that were employed by them. So when you look at the private people, are you bringing them to do anything different? No. Rather, you are just trying to bring them to maybe to empower a friend that helped you to be there because his company is into that. No. We must think of, if you want to build infrastructure, when you talk about infrastructure, you talk about digital infrastructure. These days, infrastructure is not about digital to make things ease of doing business. So if you have the digital infrastructure, you don't need 4, 5, 6, 7 people standing on the way stopping me. Yeah. It's all on the system. So why is it that it's easier for you to travel to other countries and you take your baggage and you do the digital scanning of your baggage and you pass through? And nobody's coming to ask you anything and you go through. Why is it difficult? It's not rocket science. Okay. It's just because we've not had the political will to want to do the right thing.
We're joined now virtually by Gospel Obele, who's an economist, and I wanted to get to him very quickly. Gospel, if you can hear me, how are you doing? Can you hear me?
Hi, Ebuka. Good afternoon. I can hear you clearly.
Thanks for joining us. So I wanted to zero in on Lagos State in particular, because you can't talk about Nigeria's economy without talking about Lagos. It's a huge part of our GDP. It's the commercial nerve center of the country, and it's sort of embroiled in what's going on now. I was going through a Business Day publication. They had a list of the top 10 states in Nigeria for ease of doing business. It was Gombe, Jigawa, Sokoto, Kebbi, Katsina, Bauchi, Anambra, Kaduna, Yobe, and Plateau. Lagos was not anywhere there. Now, we did have in the past the controversy with Gokada, who had come in and put in this huge investment that ended up with a ban on Okadas, and the investment ended up folding. And now we have the landmark situation. I mean, you can say on the one hand that it's not a Lagos State problem because the federal government says it's their right of way, but this property was given to them by the Lagos State government. And people say that these things are signals to people who would like to come into the country to invest when they see what other businesses are going through or have gone through. What's the motivation to come in?
Well, first of all, I mean, Lagos is one of the, if not to say the commercial capital in Nigeria right now. And as much as things have evolved significantly in Lagos, there's still a very strong red ocean market and also a host of lots of opportunities, you know, if unlocked correctly via the means of regulations and proper investment in Lagos economy. Now, what has happened recently with the landmark story has been a bit limiting in terms of how that narrative has been sold. And to a large extent, we've also not seen the necessary regulatory institutions within the state, you know, come out to say anything. All right, these things are very, very key in terms of protecting investors' interest. Investors want to be able to understand the state side of the story, to be able to balance out on what happened, you know, in context, and how that is also being evolved, how that development is constantly being evolved. it's safe to say that, all right, the reasons why the reasons why doing business in Lagos is pretty difficult is because of the cost side, all right, of doing business in Lagos in itself. And take for instance as well, you look at the consumer side who are also trapped in daily increased cost of living because it's Lagos primarily. Now, there's an increased cost of living nationally in Nigeria and even globally, but some states are much more exposed by virtue of the cost dynamics of how that state operates. All right. So you realize that states like Ibadan or your state are slower in terms of pace of taking on those shocks than Lagos. All right. And you've seen that all of those things are rubbing off on doing business. But I meant to say here is that the Lagos state government has to come forward to project the state for as a as a state of opportunity, all right, for doing business. And what I want to think for is regulatory benefits, all right, that are being introduced to protect investors, protect local businesses, and all of that. And also, there's an opportunity really on this ease of business narrative, because with the old infrastructure link up between Lagos and Oyo State, it's now a thing of how do you attract people away from quote unquote seemingly very busy red ocean markets, all right, that lack the probably necessary regulations to seemingly more slower paced, increasing purchasing power income market, all right. And I've seen that firsthand. You right, you have a spa business who was formerly in terrestrial market relocate to your state, and they're doing way better than they're doing right now when they were in Lagos State. You have a small smoked fish startup, all right, who couldn't even access to put their own products on the shelf in ShopRite, and they're being able to do that in the same ShopRite in Ring Road, Ibadan. All right, so the dynamics of these markets are changing. All right, so one of the things I probably want to encourage the state governments to do is to project the light of these states better, and then states that are neighboring should project the opportunities of doing business in those other states better. And then startups who have also benefited from this engagement should be plugged into the mainstream of that storytelling. But it's safe to say as well that Nigeria in itself have not been able to come up with a very context-driven metric for measuring business performance in the sense. The only institution that have succeeded and successfully attempted to do so is Faith Foundation. All right, it's a Faith Foundation State of Entrepreneurship Report where they've been able to cluster all states in terms of ease of doing business, business performance, perception to opportunities, innovation, technology adoption, and the likes. And I think that is a slightly more close to accurate, especially when it comes to reflection of how policies in the past 1 year has impacted on the ease of doing business in Nigeria. So I think we need to do more in supporting local institutions who are voicing out from an evidence-based perspective, as well as state regulatory bodies and neighborhood states also have to do better in terms of explaining and helping us understand the context for doing business and how opportunities are evolving as well.
So my guest here, Mukhtar Mohammed, had talked earlier about some of these low-hanging fruits that are available to government, and the one thing he said, which we tend to hear a lot, is this lack of political will as a whole to do anything. You've mentioned there. Data, for example, is almost impossible to find anywhere in Nigeria with regards to things like this. Why are we not there yet? I mean, we have a government who promised to assemble a stellar team. We have a CBN governor who's doing things, I mean, on the fiscal side of things, on the monetary side of things. We have a government who's with Minister of Finance. I mean, we're not here from the CBN government, but we suppose we're at a point now where we understand that policy is probably as important, if not more important, than this infrastructure talk sometimes. Why is it so hard to get that political will to do these things?
First and foremost, Ebuka, to be honest with you, one of the things that we've missed on a landslide, regardless of the administration in power, is that we've grossly underestimated the effort it will take to ensure Nigeria is a working business environment. Nigeria has a working business environment, meaning that, all right, it's easy to start a business, to grow, to thrive, and all of that. And that's because the market dynamics of how the Nigerian economy works, all right, in many cases, it's not being factored into the manifestos, into the elections, into the governing dynamics, even into the selection of those who manage public offices, and into how policies are being drawn, all right, even when an administration kicks off, in a sense. All right, take for instance now the single impact of inflation on the ease of doing business. All right, inflation in itself has crippled the supply chain, has crippled the cost of doing business. Interest rates have impacted on the cost of capital, all right, the cost of accessing, the cost of borrowing monies and all of that to run your business production and all that. All right, the average Nigerian is struggling, all right, trying to meet the basic necessity. Now, as markets are evolving, you also have a state where some certain industries have evolved on their own, all right, in spite of government. You also have a case where many industries, for example, the cosmetic beauty care industry, are grossly either not regulated or under-regulated. All right, so you have a case of poor regulation. You have a case of market behavior constantly changing as a result of speculation around tripping and all that. You also have a case of many other market dynamics happening at the same time. Now, if you do not factor these things within the context of the policies you're trying to make, all right, you would lose track of what really you need to do, all right, to enable the environment kick off when it comes to ease of doing business. So outside just the political will, there's a gross underestimation of the efforts required to ensure that policies are a reflection of how markets are evolving and they fit within the context of, the flexibility of how markets are evolving as well.
All right, I'll come back to you now. Let me throw this to my guest here in the studio, because he mentioned something there and I wanted to get your thoughts on that. How much can the state's governments do in spite of the federal government? I mean, he touched there about what a state like Oyo State, for example, can do with regards to what's happening with Lagos. Do the state governments have enough of an incentive to fix their regions while the federal is not doing enough on the policy side? Is that a realistic way to look at it?
It's a realistic way to go. But what we've seen is that we see governments that practice feeding bottle, they say it's feeding bottle federalism, whereby every month they're thinking of how much will come from Abuja. Nobody's looking at, can I develop my state to make my state what it is so that it can attract investors? If you look at the state that you mentioned of ease of doing businesses, how much have those states attracted to the Nigerian economy? When you look at in terms of foreign direct investment or foreign portfolio investment that have come into this country, you realize that 95% of this comes through Lagos. And it's based on the infrastructure, the federal infrastructure that is there in Lagos, and also with what the state government have been able to do. And if you want to talk about the state government, sometimes you see some rights, some things that they've done that end up killing businesses. Multiple taxation, you talk about the go-kada thing, you talk about even the current dispatch rider. Sometimes when you're driving, you see the way these young guys are being harassed from one point to one local government, even within Lagos State. You talk about double taxation. So what we've not seen a state that have come together and look at the informal sector and say, like, this sector is me. It's my state ways of growing our own state-owned economy. No state have been able to come up with a state-owned economic policy whereby it's being driven by the state. Well, then what you get from the federal is just an addition. Almost all the states in Nigeria depend, even if you look at the South state, they depend on the 13% derivation, they depend on the special need being their oil producing states. I mean, they don't really come up with innovations to drive businesses to grow in their own sector. Exception from Kebbi State, I've tried to do the Kebbi rice, where you see the government putting in a lot of policy there, and these rice are only patronized in places like Lagos State. How do you think if Lagos decide to become the aquatic splendor or the fishery headquarter in Nigeria? Because over 80% of the land mass in Lagos is water. So how have we been able to come up with innovation on how to grow this based on the resources that we have? The state will tell you that, oh, federal government, you don't own resources in the state. But I give you an example. Federal government said, okay, every state now, you can even generate power. They were making noise before now. Oh, you don't give us the license. And all of a sudden, President Nubi, the first thing he signed into law was the ability for every state to be able to, how many states have been able to develop in 1 kilowatt into, everybody seems to go back because they don't seem, what we see is that we don't have businessmen running the state affair. We have people that have all their life, they have been in the public sector. So they don't even know how the private sector operates. So every state can decide. Let me give an example like Oyo State. If Oyo State decides that we used to be the headquarters of cocoa in this country, as a government, we are going to support cocoa farmers. In the end, that what cocoa farmers Mark, when these farmers earn this money, they are going to bring it back to your state. You are going to earn taxes from those exports. You are going to attract foreign investment into Oyo State. Maybe by virtue of that, one chocolate company will want to come. Let's establish a base here in Oyo State because it's close to the road. So states doesn't think like that because sometimes the politician in this part of the world only think about the short term. They say, oh, I have only 4 years. Oh, I have only 8 years. There's little that I can do that. It's nobody thinking about an industry that you grow that will take you about 12 years to build up to get to where you want to get to, because you feel that after that, the incoming administration will take the glory. That's why you see sometimes administration is going out of power. He started a project that is not yet fully functional. He said, I want to commission it because he wants it to be his project. When he's talking about, when you talk about, he was saying political will, even with that. Look, it's the politicians that are in power that will give you the necessary impetus to say, okay, I want to establish a structure that is going to run with or without me. When he was talking about businesses, it's not rocket science. You need the political will to set up something that will run without you. Nigerian challenges as it stands now is structural. It's not about but the average Nigerian politician is talking. When you see another Nigerian politician talking about what their popular language, restructuring. What they are talking about is political restructuring. Nobody is looking at economic restructuring, and it's an economic restructuring that will build prosperity. I tell people, what's the essence of governance? Government is just here for two reasons: provide security and create prosperity for your people.
Thank you very much, sir. This is a very extensive conversation, but unfortunately we're out of time. Thank you very much, Mukhtar Mohammed. Thank you very much, Gospel Obele, for joining us virtually. We'll look at the remaining parts of the year and hopefully things start to shape up at some point. We're going to take a quick break now. I'll be right back. Please stay with us. A lot has happened in the past week, and that's what we're going to be looking at right now. Some headlines that caught our attention, whether it's the 10th year anniversary of, or 10th year... We're marking the 10th year of the abduction of the Chibok girls. The NLC is in the news again, or Labour as a whole, with regards to the minimum wage conversation. And of course, gunmen still attacking communities. Here in Nigeria, I'm joined now virtually by Timi Olagunju, who's a political analyst and legal practitioner. Timi, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Ebuka. It's a pleasure to see you.
Same here. I just want to start very quickly now. Yes, it's been a while. Thanks. Even if you're not here, good to see you too. I wanted to start with this conversation that the organized labor have started. They did submit a proposed new minimum wage to Mr. President of 615,000 naira, according to the Sunday Punch. And a lot of people are wondering, is that a realistic target? Yes, it might look like what should be as a livable wage. But does that look like something that could happen? And where's the money coming from?
That's a very, very tough one, you know, considering the state of the economy as it stands. But then, you know, when we talk about these things, I like to bring a bit of evidence into the picture. And then when you look at it on a comparative scale, right? Let's look at let's not even go far. Let's look at our neighbors. In Benin Republic here, people earn minimum wage of 100K upwards. That's the minimum wage they earn in Naira, you know, in Naira form, having converted it. Now, when you look at Niger Republic, that is still trying to battle with a few things here and there, as it stands, you see that the minimum wage is around 90,000 Naira, right? And so the minimum wage of Nigeria at 30,000 Naira, when you look at it on a comparative scale, which amounts to about $20, does not on a comparative scale speak well of, you know, the Nigerian economic situation for the labor force. And when you look at it, this is also in context with the fact that, you know, countries like Benin and Niger that I mentioned, because they are neighbors, right? Their per capita income is much lower. It's much lower than that of Nigeria. And then the GDP. Nigeria boasts of a GDP of about $400 billion, but Benin Republic boasts of a GDP of about 17 billion, right? And Niger boasts of a GDP of about 15 billion. But Nigeria's GDP is about $400 billion. And so for the minimum wage to be much lower much, much lower. In fact, if you divide the minimum wage of Niger or Benin Republic by 2 or 3, that's when you get the Nigerian minimum wage. So that doesn't seem practical. However, when you also look in context, right, the context that I'm looking at here is also the context of the general overview of the living standards, right? What you can get for, say, 100 naira in Nigeria, you might get it for 110 or thereabout in, this countries, Benin and Niger, because the cost of living is somewhat a bit higher than that of Nigeria in certain places in Nigeria. So practically speaking, we need to put this into context to determine what really the minimum wage can be in practical terms. But all that I want to say is that the minimum wage needs to be a living wage, the wage that satisfies people's capacity, having worked to meet the basic Maslow's hierarchy of need, which are food, clothing, shelter, not even to talk of other things thereabout.
It's an ongoing conversation, I guess. We're waiting for what Mr. President is going to say, but at least the one thing that we know that's been recurring as a theme for this government has been the fact that there's no money to do anything. So people are watching to see how this plays out. It is very essential, like you've mentioned, but we just all wonder how this is going to be done.
The money is there.
Yeah.
The money is there. Let them cut the cost of governance. The money will come. But anyways, sorry for that.
Fair enough. Let's look quickly now at the past week we also sort of marked the 10th anniversary of the abduction of the Chibok girls, which of course caught the attention of the whole world when it happened. 10 years down the line, a lot of these girls we hear are still not rescued, are still not free. We don't even know if there's still efforts to try and find where they are. Even more jarring is the fact that we still hear almost on a constant basis of schools being attacked and students being abducted 10 years after this happened. What does that tell of, what lessons we should have learned from the incidents from 10 years ago?
The incident is a sad one, and I'm happy that you are bringing it up because this is what, the media necessarily needs to start doing, bringing up. It is not only always about sensational stories, but also reminding trackbacks of things that matter to us as a country. I think that, frankly speaking, the institution of governance seems more concerned to itself than to its citizens. And I say that because the levity in which the situation of the Chibok girls is being taken may not be as commendable as it should have been, right? What we see is a lot of private efforts, international non-NGO efforts towards rehabilitation. We also need to see it is not enough for it to be done in secret. Government work cannot be done in secret, right? It can be, if you are doing private charity, you can do that in secret and God will reward you openly. But when it comes to government work, as long as taxpayers' money, the resource of the people are concerned, it's important that you communicate efforts that are being made, not just to ensure that the girls are gotten, but also reintegrated into society. Because the burden is now on all of us. They are a product, what happened to them is a product of a failed system, a failing state. And so it behoves on that state to do what is necessary and be seen to be doing what is necessary to integrate those young ones into society in a way that they become beneficial contributors to society. And that's my take on this practically.
Thank you very much. It's very key that we always keep that in mind and don't forget, especially the lessons that should be learned, and also don't forget the girls who are still being headed. And I want to move to, the oil/economy. Because a headline caught my attention during the week, and it said Nigeria is struggling to find for its crude oil. I think about 30 million barrels, they said. About 20 to 25 shipments of Nigerian crude oil are seeking buyers, according to traders. And there's a couple of reasons why that is. There's a short in demand from Europe, which are some of our biggest buyers in the past. And this is very, very significant considering, the role oil plays in our economy. If we're at a point now where we can't seem to find anybody who wants to buy this thing, and all the pointers are to the fact that it will get even worse in the future with what's happening in the auto industry and electronic vehicles and all of that. This demand is going to continue to fall. Are we ready for what is coming?
That's a very, very spot-on question, you know, and that's the same question we've always asked year in, year out. And these things are not new. You don't need to be a soothsayer, you know, to be able to predict that these things are going to be happening. It's just about, you know, policy projections and understanding the research and evidence that is before you. And it's sad that before now, these are issues that have been raised. We've been discussing this matter 5, 10 more years ago, that indeed a time will come when Nigeria's oil will not have significance, will not, you know, have the necessary demand as it should be. These are conversations that has been happening both on a global, on a continental, on a regional, and on a national scale, right? So it is not a surprise. But the way we then tend to think or act like this thing is a surprise is what baffles me, right? Governance is not rocket science. And the world is becoming more of a global street rather than a global village. So in other words, if your neighbor throws a stone at your glass house, it surely will affect you. And that is the nature of the global community. And so I think going forward, we need to start looking into context at the realization that climate change is a thing. And the world is beginning to move away from fossil fuel. And also, the little that we are also gathering from fossil fuel, we need to understand that it is time that we begin to look back and see how to reinvest those resources in diversified measures into areas of innovation. I like what the Ministry of Communication is doing with innovation, but that cannot work if it does not become a national agenda. One single ministry cannot do it alone if the presidency does not take it as its core duty to ensure that innovation and the drive towards building innovation ecosystem is the way forward towards diversifying the Nigerian economy. It's just the beginning, actually. It is just the beginning.
Well, I want us to try and end on some sort of happy notes, because I still linked to the last conversation we just had. We did get some cheering news that the Dangote refinery had started producing diesel for the local market. We saw a slight drop in prices of diesel, and people are starting to get excited because we hear that I think about May, fuel will also hit the market. And is there a possibility that this demand for people who are going to buy this might start being channeled through the Dangote refinery for local use? And secondly, how excited should Nigerians be for, you know, what this means for, one, what's happening with Forex, and secondly, you know, just availability and hopefully reduced pricing of this product?
Absolutely. It's a step in the right direction because for a nation to grow, there must be locally refining of not just crude oil, but the local refining of its products, its cocoa, local refining of its farm produce. And that is just an evidence to show that if we can begin to invest more in driving policies that attracts investments in certain sectors of the economy, right, that might significantly bring down the prices of goods than even the crash of the dollar. For example, we've seen with the current crash of the dollar, the prices of goods have not reduced any significantly. And so that tells you that, you know, all that dollar economics is not enough to bring down the cost of living. The real economics that brings down the cost of living and increases standard of living is local production economics.
All right.
And I think that's a take for us, actually.
Thank you very much, Timi, for joining us. Looking forward to things starting to look up, at least, if that's a sign of where things might be headed. And I hope people will get inspired by that and we'll start looking a little more inwards. Thanks a lot for joining us, as always. We're going to take a quick break now, and we'll be right back. Please stay with us. Back. Now, a lot of us complain a lot, when we get in our cars, we take a drive, wherever it is, and we say, I've been driving for 3 hours, I'm so tired. Nobody should disturb me, I need to rest, But we have someone here who showed us that what you've been doing is child's play. I'm sure you've heard the name, you've heard of her feat, which is absolutely inspiring to a lot of us, and it's been nice to follow her journey and finally have her in our studio, a travel and lifestyle content creator, and I say, most importantly, a hero. Someone who has shown us that the impossible can be done. Pelumi Nubi, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Yes, I'm sure a lot of you know, but if you don't, she did embark on a drive from London to Lagos.
I did.
By road.
By
road. So that we can put it in clear context. Alone. Very, very, very important to put that as well. And I've seen a lot of your interviews, and you carried us through the journey anyway, virtually. Did you expect what you saw at the end of this, or what you felt at the end of this? Because you start this journey, and as a travel vlogger, a travel content creator, it's an experience for you. But coming to all of the welcome, and then what it felt like, how has it been?
You know that meme? I never expected it. It's so perfect in this situation. Like you said, I've done so many travel visits over 80 plus countries, so travel is something I do. But I think it was the scale of this trip. It was just the audacity and the tenacity that I had to go into it. And the momentum online was already building over the last 2 months. And I just felt like, okay, people are really tuning into this, and they're really involved, like really concerned about my safety and everything in between. But I was not expecting, it was from semi-border. It was from the border.
The noise started.
Where the jubilation, the celebration, and everything in between, and just the smooth shout out to the Lagos State government, the smooth transition, the escort, what is going on? And then getting to University of Lagos, in the carnival, and just the celebration. People flew down, they came from different countries to celebrate with me. So yeah, it was absolutely mind-blowing. And the feeling, when I remember leaving London and my home getting smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror, and my excitement level at that point was at 100. I never thought I could top that feeling, just the joy, the relief of crossing the finish line, because you had ups and downs this whole journey. But yeah, I'm just so delighted.
I know, we did see. Well, I understand you're a travel blogger, but when we think of London, we don't necessarily think of people driving.
Facts.
Right? Did you like driving? Because I don't know if anybody's asked that. Why did you decide to drive?
I really do love road trips. Okay. I did one in 2022 across Namibia, 4,000 kilometers solo as well. And with driving, what I love the most about it is how you can just stop. So if something just catch your eye, you're just like, oh, wait a minute, let me park and stay. You can't do that with train or flight that has that, destination to destination. So I definitely love the solitude of just being on my own, taking in the views, stopping, engaging with the locals as well. But yeah, love driving.
So when you set up on this journey, I remember seeing, that you were going to do this. And for some reason, there was a particular border that I kept thinking about. And it's probably not what you think. It was a border into, I think, Mauritania.
Okay.
Because I hear a lot of these stories about, there's conflict with Morocco. Morocco doesn't recognize them as a nation. And, it's a desert. And I kept saying, okay, the West Coast, to an extent, you are seeing people, I believe. You pass through communities. But the image I have of Mauritania, Morocco, and all the things we read, which is the beauty of what you've done, because you're seeing things for yourself and telling people what exactly is. Tell us about that situation, because the impression I have is I don't ever think of visiting a place like Mauritania because of what I hear.
Yes.
What was that like?
Honestly, I'm a very big believer of try it before you ditch it. Make sure you have your own real life experience. I had the same thing when I went to India at a very, very young age back in uni, and it was so different from what I saw in the media. So same thing for Mauritania. I had to almost Google in forums. People say they haven't heard that word in so long. It's so ancient. Having to research, and because there's not a lot of information or media out there, and because Mauritania just recently abolished slavery. It's very, very in the 2000s. So it's very recent. So I was just like, how would they treat a dark asking women, like, what would that? And honestly, it was such big hospitality, very, very open people, beautiful place. I think it's basically Morocco 30 years ago before it blew up. That's what Mauritania is going to become. It's going to be a very hot spot for tourism. So if you're looking into where to invest, that's a good spot. A lot of travel countries are starting to go there to just explore. So yes, it was so different to what. There wasn't more information out there, so it was definitely good to just showcase it and just show that, hey guys, this is actually a place you can visit.
Was there any place you were, I mean, when you started this journey, because I'm sure, I mean, you did your research, obviously, you knew where your path was going to be, but you're, like you said, you also hear all of these horrible stories. Yes, you're a travel blogger, you like to visit before you, but there must have been some caution.
Of course.
Were you scared about embarking on this? I know you've talked about being in touch with your family through it. What was said? What were the worry spots? You know, I mean, because I can't just get up and go and do this, because I would be like, do I really want to? You know, what was the biggest scare for you when you started this off?
The fact that I was doing it solo, this is an expedition. This is something that people have a whole team around, you know, someone in charge of medical, someone in charge of chef, someone in charge of logistics. Like, I had to wear multiple hats and doing it all by myself and updating people. So there was definitely safety. So one thing I did, for example, on social media wasn't to post in real life. People don't realize that, but I was never in the same place. So they were like, when I'm at the border, like, what's sending help? I feel like I've left already, sorry. So there was definitely that just safety precaution, being a woman, being solo, that was very, very important. And there were some hotspot regions. I had to reroute, for example, I was going to go to Mali and Burkina Faso, but we know what's going on there. So I had to reroute just to be, you know, more on the safer side. So just keeping updated in kind of what is on the news and what people are saying. But yeah, definitely lots of in-depth research. Research that I had to, like, on Google Map, literally open satellite just to see the road condition, just to make sure, like, I was carrying a Peugeot 107, so it's a very small car. You can't do crazy stuff. So yeah, Sahara Desert was definitely one that I was personally concerned about, because I'm like, can my car survive it? But recently they built the whole road. So it's actually one of the best roads I drove through. It was tarred road, and I remember shaping like, that is the Sahara. I'm like, we're in the Sahara, baby. So yeah, just again, change people's narrative, what they might, you know, conceive as or think that's the truth, but showing the true reality.
I know you said you didn't drive at night, which was very key. You tried not to. Besides, we'll get to the accident in a bit. Where were you sleeping? Were you sleeping in the car? Did you have hotels pre-booked before going? And because when I also think of the Sahara, I'm just like, how many miles are you going to drive before you see a place to stop and sleep? What was the plan with that?
So I converted my car. I put a bed in there. So we did like a whole fit. Normally with this is done on the 4x4, but I'm like, if you can do it on 4x4, you can do it on a normal car. So I put like a bed, a mattress in there. So I can actually camp in my car and sleep. And when I was back in Europe, I was doing sleeping bag. But when I got into Africa, it was hot. I'm like, take all the clothes off. So it's either I use an app called iOverlander, which shows you where previous travelers have been able to stay safely. So they literally leave a review like, this place is safe, we had security, blah, blah, blah. So I'm able to pinpoint based on the driving I want to do.
Are those places that have like communities around them?
Yeah, so it could either be just by the side of the road. So I could go that, I call it wild camping, whereby you're literally on a residential street or just a random street. I try to go on landmarks, so like a main church. Usually they'll have a guard and it's a well-lit place, and you can sleep in the night. In the morning, I wake up when the sun rises up, and then I just drive to a hotel. I'm like, oh, can I use your shower? And that's how I clean up. But my personal favorite was on campsite, because then you have all the amenities. You have a shower, laundry, all of that stuff on there. If I want to be bougie, you know, book a little cheeky hotel. And I was really blessed as well to have some hosts. So some people that lived in the place I was going through reached out, or I've had previous contact with them, like, oh, when you're visiting, you can stay in our home. Our home is open to you. So those were the options.
I kept thinking about them, like, where is she sleeping?
Where did she sleep?
Is she sleeping in the car, on the road?
Yeah.
In Africa, you know, it's all of these things to think about. Yeah. Fair enough. Now, you had this accident, which was very scary for a lot of us.
Yeah.
And I think, honestly, after that, I didn't hear anything again.
Okay.
I don't think I was locked in as much after that, because I just said, oh, well, it ends there. And then I hear she's coming to Lagos. I was like, huh? And it felt very quick from when the accident happened in Liberia, I believe.
Liberia.
Yeah, to when you got
in Ivory Coast, sorry.
Sorry, the Ivory Coast, yes. You did tell the story about, you know, the border and how it delayed you and how that led to this
accident
happening. And was West Africa the hardest with regards to crossing borders? Because I get a sense that that's what it was for you. Is that a fair way to put it?
That was fact.
Which is surprising.
Which is
for
surprising.
Someone with a Nigerian passport.
With a Nigerian passport, yeah.
You've gotten to your region where it should be more smooth sailing. Exactly. What were the things that were happening in our borders across this region?
There's no proper monitoring. There is no accountability. the people in charge, the officers, feel like they are gods. You know, there is no, if you are being harassed, if you're being, who can we report to, basically. What I found was a lot of corruption, a lot of asking for bribes
and
and
this
money.
started as soon as you got into
and
the
this
region.
it's kicked off as soon as I got into the region, skyrocketed the closer I got home. So it was just a lot of just kind of like re-educating people of the law. It's as if they know part of the law, but not other part of the laws in terms of like, you know, my right-hand vehicle. So I was bringing the vehicle from the UK, and some places, for example, say right-hand vehicle has been banned. You cannot drive it if you're residing in the place, planning to move around the lot. But the bylaw says that if you're transiting, because you know you still have the permission, you're allowed to go through. But the officers know one bit and not the other, and they want money, so you know. So it's like having to re-educate people and reteach them of what the rules are. But definitely ECOWAS needs to be improved on. You know, there was made very smooth sailing, almost borderless in Europe, whereby I was just going from France to Spain and not even knowing I was crossing countries. Will we ever get to that point in time in Africa? I'm not so sure. But I think the ECOWAS need to do better in terms of kind of not just policy on papers, but real, you know, real change needs to happen. Absolutely.
That's very, very sad.
It is.
That's really sad.
And that's something I wanted to test as well, because people are like, why didn't you contact the embassy? Number one, the correlation I had with embassies were, you know, American embassy, wake up 3 a.m. to get a visa. So, but there's definitely different arms to the embassy. And I do employ people to reach out to the embassy, because my Nigerian embassy really helped during the time I was stuck 2 nights at the borders in Liberia. And when my car accident, in terms of repair and everything, they were very, very instrumental. But I was testing, like, as a normal traveler, no connection, anything, can you travel through the African continent without any hassle? And sadly, the answer is no. You need to know people. You need to have connections.
Terrible. Were you hurt
during the accident? I was bruised. I was sore. I was a bit deflated because it was like so close, you know. There was a lot of thoughts running through my mind. You know, I had to miss my mom's 60th birthday, which was all planned, the family cruise and everything. So there was a lot of blowback, but it just felt like I needed to finish. But physically, there was no broken anything, which I
thankfully
really thankful.
Who was this mechanic that walked into
Panabitas, they are the real expert. Honestly, they came through for me. It was all hands on deck. Like, once I told them, it's as if they even bought into the vision of London to Lagos. It was like, I cannot end here, oh sister. We have to do everything we can. So shout out to them. Even with, like, you know, Peugeot 107, the model I had is so rare. Even though Peugeot is quite, you know, quite in abundance in Abidjan, but in that particular model, so they just had to put something until we got like a functional car.
Thanks to them.
Shout out to them, especially shout out to them.
Now, I've always wanted to ask this. Is it something you would ever sort of contemplate doing a Niger version of this?
Are you reading my mind?
Driving across the country.
Are we
you are?
stuff at people?
Because I've always seen people who do all of this. So I'm doing this. So, I mean, sometimes during elections, there are people who say I'm trekking from Kano to here because of the president. I've always wondered, has anybody done a drive like to all 36 states, so through the country? Is this something you would do? I
think more of like highlights and pinpoints. I've been able to showcase so many different countries over my many years of traveling. It just seems right, you know, especially being the new Lagos ambassador of tourism, to showcase where I've, you know, this city and by extension Nigeria. So yes, that's definitely works in the nearest future.
You heard it here first.
You did.
The one other question I think people ask a lot is the passport privilege, right? You know, if you have a green passport, is this something you can do? Can I suddenly get up and go and say, I want to drive to London? You know, even if I might have a London visa, but how do I navigate, you know, the other places? Is that's a fair conversation to have?
That is a very fair conversation. So I speak about my passport privilege all the time. You know, I'm very not oblivious about it, but I also know people that have solely the Nigerian passports and being able to explore, you know, the world as vast as possible. I was able to use my British from London all the way to the Gambia, and then I switched to start using my Nigerian. So I didn't actually have to get any visa per se, which is obviously a limitation for a lot of people that might want to do this. But where I believe where there's a will, there's a way. You know, you'll find a way if you really want to do it. What's
the next big, besides the Niger one you're going to do now? I mean, we always hear Cape to Cairo.
Exactly. Something.
Is there a big plan for something maybe soon?
Though, it's Pelumi. There will always be something, you know. I think, you know, as humans or as me, I'm very quick to kind of like just blow over a big goal, something that I've set. So I'm taking this season to just excel, you know, take it all in, appreciate the fact of how far we've come. And it was 2 months, but actually like with the planning process being a year plus, so we're talking almost 2 years of planning. So to actually get to that finish line, I'm just like, okay, let's take a moment. But I'm sure I'll be like, I'm
We'll
going to Mars. I'm going somewhere.
I mean, I'm very, very, very hurt and sad by the whole ECOWAS thing because it's the one thing the leaders in our region like to trumpet. You know, how we've liberalized the economy of these places. People travel to and fro. Yes, by air, maybe.
Yes.
But, you know, we still hear the stories about the semi-border very constantly, you know. I don't know what your capacity as the new ambassador of tourism in Lagos and what that might mean for, you know, conversations like this. But, I mean, you've put this out on the spotlight now. I'm not giving you a cause to pursue, but what sorts of things do you, or conversations do you believe need to be had? Because, I mean, we've had previous segments on this particular episode where we're talking about the lack of political will to do these things. But there's so much that could be achieved. I would like to drive to Ghana.
Yeah,
it's a 7-8 hour drive.
It's not that bad.
You know, but most people just say, the border, immigration, you know, you start thinking of all of these things. Sometimes they're not as bad, but you overthink it and you just wonder, you know, do I need that stress, you know? How do we get there, you think? Do you think, I mean, you travel, you've seen all of these other borders. What are they doing differently? Number one,
there's a level of, you know, accountability in terms of, you know, if you do wrong as an officer, there should be some reporting level. You know, you should have people ahead of you that are calling you into caution. But like you mentioned something that, you know, in terms of the leadership, they tend to like, oh, ECOWAS is working. It works because you're in an official government vehicle and people are waving you across, you know. But it's not the case for an everyday traveler, which is something I was able to experience. One thing I definitely want to have conversation with is like, for example, content creators like myself that are already doing the work, are already going through the experience. I've been screaming for years about how bad the borders are and actually seeing what exactly are the pain points and where exactly can we actually implement. But I really feel until people in powers, if it's like, you know, constant rotation, so people don't feel comfortable, if it's just kind of like, you know, if we do catch you, this is the punishment, you know, you can't close early. You know, I got to the Ghana border coming to Togo. The closing time is 6 o'clock. By 5:15, the office was empty.
Really?
Honestly,
the border was closed.
The border was the office where they stamped they may stamp my car out. And I was like, what do you want me to do? Sleep here? And the guy literally looked at me like, sleep here till tomorrow. I'm like, no, I was early. I'm not going to get punished. You need to call whoever has gone home. And I think just, you know, really defending yourself and having that sense of, you know, your rights. And travelers, you should know your rights too as well. And if you have to call the right people, if you have to use social media, it's such a powerful force. But I realize officers don't like to be recorded. Stick a camera in their face and be like, I'm reporting you. But yeah, I think there's definitely lots of ways to change. And we will get there. We will.
Thank you very much, Pelumi Nubi, superstar. She drove from London to Lagos. You can check her out on social media. What's the handle?
PelumiNubi.com. Pelumi.Nubi.
Pelumi.Nubi. She's also on YouTube. Social media pages. You'll find all her amazing, amazing story that inspired everyone. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And good luck on the next adventure.
Such a pleasure.
And thanks a lot for joining us. Like I always say, you can follow the conversation on social media. Please use the hashtag #RubbinMinds and send us a message. I'll see you next time.